The global technology landscape just witnessed a seismic shift that will reshape the semiconductor industry for years to come. On December 1, 2025, the Chinese government implemented a groundbreaking export control policy that sent shockwaves through boardrooms from Amsterdam to Silicon Valley. The new regulation is deceptively simple yet devastatingly effective. Any lithography equipment or related components containing even 0.1% of Chinese-origin rare earth materials, regardless of where the final product is assembled or which shipping routes it takes, now requires explicit approval from Beijing before it can leave the country. But that's not all. In tandem with this rare earth restriction, Chinese authorities rolled out an enhanced scrutiny protocol for advanced semiconductor manufacturing tools. Equipment designed to produce logic chips at 14 nanometers or smaller, machinery for creating high-performance memory chips, and all associated critical materials must now pass through an individualized review process before export. Each application will be examined on its own merits, with no guarantees of approval. Within hours of the announcement, semiconductor executives across the globe scrambled to assess the damage. Industry analysts immediately recognized this wasn't a broad, untargeted policy meant to flex geopolitical muscle. Instead, this was a surgical strike, a precisely calibrated response aimed squarely at one country, the Netherlands. To understand why China would launch such a focused campaign against a relatively small European nation, we need to rewind the clock just a few months and examine a corporate takeover that went disastrously wrong. The Nexperia Seizure, when the Netherlands crossed the line. September 30th, 2025, marked a turning point in Sino-Dutch relations that few saw coming. On that day, Dutch authorities executed what can only be described as a corporate raid. Their target, Nexperia, a semiconductor manufacturer with deep Chinese ownership and even deeper roots in the global automotive supply chain. The operation was conducted with stunning abruptness. There were no preliminary negotiations, no diplomatic warnings, and no opportunity for the company to respond to allegations. Dutch regulators simply moved in and took control. Within days, the Amsterdam Court of Appeal had forcibly removed Nexperia's Chinese chief executive, a man named Zhang Shuing, without even granting him a hearing to defend himself or his company's operations. In his place, Dutch authorities installed a foreign interim CEO and transferred 99% of the company's equity to a third-party trust structure, effectively stripping Chinese stakeholders of their ownership rights overnight. The official justification? The Dutch government claimed Nexperia suffered from severe management failures, and that intervention was necessary to prevent supply chain disruptions and safeguard the economic security of both the Netherlands and the broader European Union. Yet here's where the story becomes truly bizarre. Dutch authorities never produced any concrete evidence to support their claims. No financial misconduct was documented. No security breaches were identified. No operational failures were demonstrated. The accusations remained vague and unsubstantiated, leaving observers to wonder what really motivated such an extreme action. What we do know is that Nexperia's history tells a very different story. The company was fully acquired in 2019 by Wingtech Technology, a prominent Chinese semiconductor firm, in a transaction valued at approximately $3.6 billion. In the 6 years since that acquisition, Nexperia has evolved into one of the world's most important suppliers of automotive-grade power semiconductors. These aren't luxury items or optional upgrades. They're the fundamental building blocks that make modern vehicles function safely and efficiently. Nexperia's client roster reads like a who's who of global manufacturing. Bosch, BYD, Siemens, and countless others depend on the company's components for everything from electric vehicle powertrains to industrial automation systems. The company ships more than 110 billion semiconductor units annually, making it an indispensable link in countless supply chains. So why would the Netherlands suddenly move to seize control of such a strategically vital company? The answer appears to lie not in Amsterdam, but in Washington. Following America's lead, the real reason behind the Dutch crackdown. To understand the Netherlands' actions, we must examine the broader context of US-China technological competition. Starting in December 2024, the United States Department of Commerce added WingTech Technology to its notorious Entity List, a blacklist that severely restricts American companies from doing business with the designated firms. The justification was predictably thin on specifics, but heavy on national security rhetoric. Then, in a move of remarkable timing, just one day before the Dutch seizure of Nexperia, U.S. authorities introduced what they called a piercing rule. This new regulation expanded sanctions to encompass any subsidiary in which an entity list company holds majority ownership, defined as more than 50% equity. With this single regulatory stroke, Nexperia found itself unable to purchase critical manufacturing equipment, access certain technologies, or maintain normal business relationships with American suppliers. The sequence of events is difficult to interpret as mere coincidence. The Netherlands, a close ally of the United States and a key player in the global semiconductor ecosystem, appeared to be coordinating its actions with Washington's broader strategy to constrain China's technological advancement. Perhaps Dutch policymakers believed they could execute this maneuver without serious consequences. After all, they had American backing, European support, and legal control over a valuable corporate asset. On paper, it looked like a winning strategy. In reality, they had just made one of the costliest miscalculations in recent European economic history. The counterstrike when Beijing drew the line. China's response came swiftly and with brutal efficiency. Exactly 1 week after the Dutch takeover announcement, authorities in Beijing issued a new export control directive that turned the tables completely. The regulation explicitly prohibited Nexperia's Chinese facilities, along with any subcontractors working with those facilities, from exporting essential products, including the automotive power semiconductors that had made the company so valuable in the first place. The impact was immediate and catastrophic. Public records show that Nexperia operates a massive packaging and testing facility in Guangdong province, spanning approximately 80,000 square meters. This plant specializes in producing discrete semiconductor devices, analog and logic chips, and power components, the exact products that European automakers desperately need to keep their assembly lines running. Before the Chinese export ban, this facility operated at roughly 90% capacity utilization, humming along efficiently to meet global demand. Within days of Beijing's intervention, that figure collapsed to less than 10%. The plant wasn't shut down entirely, but it might as well have been. More critically, Nexperia's ability to deliver products to European customers plummeted from an industry-leading 95% fulfillment rate to a dismal 3%. How could China's move be so devastatingly effective? The answer lies in a fundamental reality that Dutch authorities apparently failed to consider. While Nexperia's corporate headquarters may be registered in the Netherlands, more than 70% of its actual manufacturing capacity is located on Chinese soil, primarily in the cities of Dongguan and Shanghai. The Dutch government had seized control of the company's legal structure, its intellectual property portfolio, and its brand identity, but the factories that actually produce the chips, the physical infrastructure that transforms raw materials into finished semiconductors, remained firmly in Chinese territory, subject to Chinese laws and Chinese regulations. What the Netherlands took over was essentially a corporate shell. They captured the paperwork, but lost the substance. And in the semiconductor business, substance is everything. Making matters worse for Dutch authorities, Nexperia's Chinese entity made it crystal clear where their loyalties lay. Shortly after the takeover announcement, the company's Chinese operations informed all employees that they would take direction exclusively from the legal representative recognized by Chinese law, not from the foreign interim CEO installed by Amsterdam. This created a complete operational separation between the Dutch-controlled corporate entity and the Chinese-controlled manufacturing base. The takeover, intended to secure European control over a critical semiconductor supplier, had instead resulted in exactly the opposite. A fragmented company that couldn't fulfill orders, couldn't coordinate between its legal and operational structures, and couldn't serve its customers effectively. The Netherlands had attempted a power play and ended up powerless. Collateral damage. When Europe's automotive industry paid the price. The consequences of this failed gambit extended far beyond corporate balance sheets and diplomatic embarrassment. They rippled through the real economy with frightening speed, and nowhere was the impact more severe than in Europe's automotive sector. Germany's automotive industry, the crown jewel of European manufacturing, was hit first and hardest. Volkswagen's sprawling production facility in Wolfsburg, one of the largest car manufacturing plants in the world, was forced to halt all assembly lines when critical semiconductor supplies ran dry. The economic toll was staggering. More than 100 million euros in lost output every single day, the plant sat idle. BMW faced a different but equally painful problem. The company's flagship Munich facility, which produces some of the world's most technologically advanced luxury vehicles, saw delivery timelines balloon from 3 months to 6 months virtually overnight. Customers who had placed orders expecting prompt delivery were told to wait twice as long. Many canceled their orders entirely, contributing to what BMW executives described as historically unprecedented order losses. Across the European Union, the damage mounted rapidly. Industry estimates suggest that in just the first 2 weeks following China's export restrictions, European automakers saw more than 3.5 billion euros in production value simply evaporate. Over 12,000 workers faced temporary layoffs or significant reductions in their working hours and income, creating ripples of economic anxiety that extended into communities far removed from the semiconductor industry itself. The European Automobile Manufacturers Association, an organization that typically maintains diplomatic neutrality and rarely issues urgent public statements, broke with protocol to sound the alarm. In an extraordinary warning, they cautioned that if semiconductor supplies could not be restored quickly, Europe's automotive industry would suffer damage that might prove irreversible, potentially triggering factory closures, permanent job losses, and a structural decline in European manufacturing competitiveness. Why was Europe so vulnerable? The answer lies in Nexperia's unique and nearly irreplaceable position in the automotive electronics ecosystem. The company's components are embedded in virtually every safety-critical system in modern vehicles: anti-lock braking systems, electronic stability control, airbag deployment mechanisms, advanced lighting systems, and high-voltage power management modules for electric vehicles. From Volkswagen and Toyota to Tesla and Ford, essentially every major automaker on the planet depends on Nexperia's supply. The crisis wasn't confined to Europe either. Automotive manufacturing in North America and South America felt the shockwaves as well. Honda announced production cuts and temporary shutdowns at multiple assembly facilities across North America. One plant in Ontario, Canada, was forced to reduce its output by half, sending workers home and leaving partially assembled vehicles sitting on the factory floor, awaiting components that might never arrive. Industry data reveals the depth of the dependency. Approximately 86% of Europe's critical industrial firms purchase semiconductor components from Nexperia's Chinese manufacturing facilities. Even more concerning, about 1/3 of automotive supply chain companies rely on Nexperia as their exclusive supplier for certain specialized components, meaning they have no alternative sources available. In theory, automakers could attempt to switch to different semiconductor suppliers. In practice, doing so is extraordinarily difficult and time-consuming. Automotive-grade semiconductors must meet stringent safety and reliability standards, requiring extensive testing and certification processes that typically take many months and sometimes more than a year to complete. Vehicles are not consumer electronics. They cannot be updated with patches or recalls if components fail. Every chip must be proven reliable before it can be deployed in production vehicles. By early November, the pressure had become unbearable. The German Association of the Automotive Industry, representing the country's powerful car manufacturers, issued what amounted to an ultimatum to the Dutch government. The message was blunt: find a solution, or Germany, France, and Italy would invoke emergency provisions under Article 17 of the EU Chips Act, which allows member states to designate semiconductor facilities as projects of common European interest during times of crisis. This legal maneuver would effectively allow major European powers to bypass Dutch legal authority and place Nexperia's European wafer fabrication plants under international control. It was a direct warning to Amsterdam: your actions are pushing Europe's most important industry toward collapse, and we will not stand by while you gamble with our economic security. The Netherlands had attempted to constrain China's semiconductor ambitions and instead found itself isolated, facing pressure from its own European partners while watching helplessly as a company it claimed to control continued operating entirely outside its authority. But if Dutch policymakers thought they had seen the worst of China's response, they were about to discover they had barely scratched the surface. The nuclear option, rare earth controls, and the lithography stranglehold. On December 1st, 2025, China activated what many industry observers are calling the nuclear option in semiconductor trade policy. The new rare earth export controls represent not just an escalation in the dispute with the Netherlands, but honestly, a fundamental reassertion of China's leverage over the global technology supply chain. The policy contains two provisions that together form a comprehensive chokehold on advanced semiconductor manufacturing. The first is the 0.1% rule, a threshold so low it effectively covers the entire lithography equipment sector. Any machinery or components containing even trace amounts of Chinese-origin rare earth materials must now secure an export license from Beijing, complete with detailed documentation about the ultimate end user and intended application. Critically, this restriction applies regardless of where the equipment is manufactured or how it's transported. So, a lithography machine built in the Netherlands using Chinese rare earth materials cannot be shipped to Taiwan, even if it passes through Singapore, Dubai, or any other intermediary location. The 0.1% threshold means there's just no practical way to dilute or obscure the Chinese content. It will always be detectable, and therefore always subject to Chinese regulatory authority. The second provision targets advanced manufacturing equipment with laser precision. Any tools designed to produce logic semiconductors at the 14-nanometer node or smaller. Equipment for fabricating memory chips with 256 layers or more. And all associated testing equipment and raw materials must now undergo individual case-by-case review. There are no automatic approvals, no streamlined processes, and honestly, no guarantees that any particular application will be accepted. Together, these measures give China effective veto power over the global advanced semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem. And they aim that power directly at the Netherlands' most important technology company, ASML. ASML, the vulnerable giant at the center of the storm. ASML Holding is not just another semiconductor equipment manufacturer. The company, headquartered in Veldhoven, Netherlands, holds a monopoly on extreme ultraviolet lithography systems, the most advanced chip-making machines ever created. These EUV systems, which can cost upward of 150 million euros each, are absolutely essential for manufacturing the most cutting-edge semiconductors that power everything from smartphones and data centers to artificial intelligence systems and autonomous vehicles. Without ASML's machines, chip makers like TSMC, Samsung, and Intel simply cannot produce their most advanced products. The company's technological lead is so substantial that no competitors have managed to develop viable alternatives. In the world of advanced semiconductor manufacturing, ASML is irreplaceable, and ASML has a critical vulnerability. It depends heavily on Chinese rare earth materials. China's dominance in rare earth processing is not a recent development or a temporary market aberration. It's a structural reality built over decades of strategic investment and industrial development. While rare earth minerals can be found in many locations worldwide, refining them into the high-purity materials required for advanced technology is an entirely different challenge. China controls approximately 90% of global rare earth refining capacity, a monopoly built on massive infrastructure investments, specialized technical expertise, and economies of scale that no other country has matched. For ASML, this dependency runs deep into the company's core technologies. The ultra-precise optical systems that define EUV lithography machines rely entirely on cerium-based polishing compounds sourced from China. These materials enable the manufacture of mirrors and lenses so smooth and perfect that they can focus extreme ultraviolet light, which has a wavelength of just 13.5 nanometers, with extraordinary accuracy. The powerful motors that drive ASML's lithography systems use more than 10 kilograms of rare earth permanent magnets per machine. These magnets, which account for more than 30% of certain component costs, provide the precise motion control required for nanometer-scale accuracy. The magnetic levitation systems that position wafers with atomic-level precision require heavy rare earth elements like dysprosium and terbium, materials for which there are currently no commercially viable substitutes at the required purity levels. Industry data indicates that the rare earth compounds ASML imports from China annually represent approximately 26.4% of China's total rare earth exports, making the Dutch company one of China's largest single customers for these critical materials. This dependency isn't a supply chain oversight or a temporary arrangement. It's the foundational basis for ASML's technological capabilities. Over recent years, ASML has made multiple attempts to diversify its rare earth supply chain and reduce reliance on Chinese sources. Every attempt has failed. When the company experimented with replacing critical rare earth magnets with alternative materials, production costs increased by roughly 40%, while equipment performance decreased by approximately 30%. The resulting machines could not meet the precision requirements for advanced semiconductor manufacturing, rendering the entire exercise pointless. ASML has explored rare earth sources in Southeast Asia, where several countries are attempting to build refining capacity. However, the region currently accounts for less than 5% of global rare earth refining output, and the technical sophistication of these facilities lags far behind Chinese capabilities. The purity levels achievable in Southeast Asian facilities typically fall short of the 99.9% minimum required for lithography equipment applications. The United States possesses rare earth mineral deposits and has attempted to revive domestic refining capacity. But American rare earth processing costs run approximately 3 times higher than Chinese equivalents, and the purity levels achieved by U.S. facilities typically reach only about 92.9%, adequate for many applications, but insufficient for the most demanding uses in EUV lithography systems. Facing simultaneous constraints from supply chain costs, technical challenges, and quality control requirements, ASML has found no viable pathway to eliminate its dependence on Chinese rare earth materials. The company remains structurally vulnerable to any disruption in Chinese supply. And now, facing China's new export controls, that vulnerability has become an existential threat. The clock is ticking. ASML's critical timeline. Current estimates suggest that ASML's existing inventory of rare earth materials can sustain production for approximately 8 weeks. That's not a generous buffer. It's barely enough time to navigate normal supply chain fluctuations, let alone to adapt to a fundamental restructuring of export approval processes. If Chinese authorities delay or deny export license applications, which, to be honest, they have every legal right to do under the new regulations, ASML's monthly production output could decline by 15 to 20 complete lithography systems. Given that each system represents hundreds of millions of euros in revenue, annual losses could easily exceed 3 billion euros. And that's just the direct revenue impact. The secondary consequences could be even more damaging. ASML's customers, the world's leading semiconductor manufacturers, operate on carefully planned production schedules with massive capital investments at stake. If ASML cannot deliver machines on time, those customers will face their own production delays, missed market opportunities, and potential contract penalties. Some may begin exploring alternative suppliers or technologies, eroding ASML's dominant market position. The Netherlands bet that it could pressure China through technology restrictions while continuing to benefit from Chinese raw materials and manufacturing capacity. That bet has now come due, and the cost appears to be substantially higher than anyone in Amsterdam anticipated. The fundamental asymmetry: technology versus resources. At the heart of this conflict lies a profound imbalance. The Netherlands, following America's lead, has attempted to use its technological advantages, particularly in lithography equipment, as leverage against China. The implicit assumption was that China's dependence on foreign technology would force Beijing to accept restrictions and constraints without retaliation. But this analysis overlooked a critical asymmetry. While the Netherlands can restrict China's access to advanced lithography equipment, China controls the raw materials and manufacturing capacity that make such equipment possible in the first place. Technology and resources are not interchangeable. They're complementary, and neither can function without the other. Moreover, the asymmetry runs deeper than simple market leverage.